All right, Jeromy, thank you for coming out today. It's a real pleasure. I've been super excited to have you and have a conversation with you. So welcome to the Bold Strong program.
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity. It's been a crazy week here kicking off Calgary Stampede, and just really nice to see some signs of life here in the downtown.
Yeah, that's and I heard just this morning that the Premier's breakfast is not being held right behind us here at the Lougheed Centre.
Yeah, the McDougall Centre is under a bunch of renovations, so it's just in the courtyard of the courts, basically. Yeah. And it was a good reception, and obviously not as big as previous years, but they always put on a really good spread, and it was nice to see the politician petting zoo out in force.
You know what? I heard today in the news that 18 years ago, you know what happened?
What happened?
You might be too young to remember this. Pie in the face.
I
did not see any pie in the face 18 years ago.
Well,
isn't that crazy?
Today, I've never been pied as a politician, although I think there might be some listeners who think challenge accepted.
Yep, that's right. Well, and I think broadly people think that's probably a very bad idea. So we shouldn't be doing things like that. So.
Well, I think at a time like this, I think people really see how the decisions being made at every level of government impact them. Usually, I won't say for every single voter, but many people just, they vote every couple of years and they expect the trains to run on time. They expect the garbage to get picked up. They imagine that all of this stuff will be taken care of. But through the pandemic and through the lockdowns, it's been very clear that we've seen successive governments and politicians having really unprecedented power and involvement in people's lives. So I think as we think about this election and the campaign, it's not just the biggest election that we're facing here in Calgary's history, but it's also one that really reminds people that the folks who we elect, based on their principles, their values, their judgment, it really matters and has a real daily impact on people's lives.
Right, and if any of our listeners are not aware, obviously there's a mayoral campaign coming up. We're in it, and you're running, and I think you were the first to jump on. Is that right?
Yeah, so we've been going about 10 or 11 months now.
Oh my goodness,
we first announced in September of last year, and it's just been incredible.
Yeah,
a lot of challenges, obviously, with the pandemic, but we've been very fortunate to build a really strong citywide campaign, several thousand volunteers, building that organization. And of course, as an independent without any parties, at least at the municipal level here in Calgary, you have to start from scratch. So you're basically based on your own personal values, your principles, and your own brand. So you don't inherit that party infrastructure, which means you basically have to start from scratch.
Wow, that's it. And I guess as I've known you, as many of us in Calgary have, I've always found you to be a really interesting person. And I think there was Jack Welch from GE, the CEO of GE. He says in his book, he said, if I have, I'm making up the number, but if I have 16 people sitting around the boardroom table and they all have the same opinion, I can see a cost savings opportunity. So you don't need it. So, and I think that's something I've really appreciated about you is that you look at the policies and you look at what's being said and you say, I'm not just going to jump in line because everyone else is jumping in line. Let's look at this and make some sense of it and do the right thing, I think, and that's maybe a little bit of who you are, right?
Well, it's apt that you pick that analogy because City Council is not really government. We're a board. We run about a $4 or $5 billion a year company. There's certain services that Calgarians expect from us, and really, as elected officials, we should be noses in, fingers out, make sure that the management is accountable. But really, our primary duty is to the everyday Calgarian as their shareholder for this company that we run.
Right.
So when you think about effective boards, obviously consensus is something that we should aspire to, but the most highest functioning corporations that you can think of are ones that have, similar even how Lincoln as president operated, having a team of rivals, those who weren't afraid to disagree, but making sure that it wasn't always the board chair or the president who was the quarterback.
Right.
Really, it comes down to having diverse points of view and having some room for civil disagreement.
Right. That makes sense. And that's actually when we talked to Daniel Smith a little while ago, that was a big topic for her, and that's maybe a little bit of why she's evolved in her career is really that it's so tough to have a civil conversation with people now. Like everyone's so on fire about their, what they believe in, and it's a big struggle. And she started to see that where it was impossible to have proper discourse, and you couldn't test theories, you couldn't say anything wrong. Everything had to be bang on, and it's that's a huge challenge, I think, when you're coming across diverse ideas and concepts. You have to be able to have discourse.
Yeah, and I think right now there's it's pretty politically divisive landscape right now, and I think even for some of the things that I put out there that some people see to be controversial, I've always found to just be common sense on behalf of my constituents. Say advocating for adequate police funding, not being in support of defunding and abolishing the police, even thinking back to our Olympic debate, wanting to make sure that Calgarians actually had a voice and a vote in such a large undertaking. Sort of controversial thinking as far as City Hall standards go, but in terms of the everyday Calgarians who pay the bills, I think it's the very bare minimum that they've come to expect.